Hi, we have our own very own PA president doing a talk evaluating the accuracy of guessing who is on the phone, who's calling. So welcome to Helané Wahbeh.
So today I'm going to talk to you about a fascinating project that we did with our team with fellow scientists at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Cedric, Cannard, Dean Radin, and Arnaud Delorme. Who's calling? So this project is about telephone telepathy. And so what is telepathy? Frederick William Henry Myers, who I imagine you all know, is one of the principal founders for the Society of Psychical Research. He coined the term telepathy in 1882 and described it as the communication of impressions of any kind from one mind to another independently of the recognized channels of sense. And telepathy experiences are quite common. This graph shows a number of survey studies that have asked people about telepathy, including one by Haraldson with over 18,000 people. So that's the blue line on, where's my pointer? Blue line right here. And so we see that that's at 34% of the people surveyed said that they had a telepathy experience. We also know from the Ganzfeld that was spoken about earlier today, this Ganzfeld protocol has been used to support telepathic studies and has some of the most reliable and robust findings in parapsychology. We saw that from Etzel Cardena's meta-analysis, and of course, Chris mentioned the Trusoldian Storm paper this morning. The effect sizes are small, but they are above zero and consistent. And we see in other fields, other aspects of psychology, there's a wide range of effect sizes, but the median for pre-registered studies is about 0.16, so it's actually kind of comparable, but it does go up to 0.36 for effect sizes. So that's very brief background on telepathy, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, so I'm not going to harp on that. But what is telephone telepathy, which is what this study is all about? Telephone telepathy, this is a phone. Many of you may have recognized this dial phone. But, I know my children have never seen anything like that, and this is what they are more familiar with. So telephone telepathy is quite common. There have been a few surveys looking at this. Sheldrake did one in 2000, where 37 to 45% of UK respondents said that they had had a telephone telepathy experience where their phone rang and they were able to know who was calling them without seeing the caller ID, of course, through some non-traditional means. They also repeated a survey in California respondents, and it was much higher. It was 47 to 78%, so it's quite common. And of course, there are mundane hypotheses for why someone could know who was calling them. Of course, there's coincidence, there's selective memory. They think they, had some psi experience, but it was really them not remembering it. Expectation, some conscious anticipation. So, they may not consciously know that mom calls at a particular time every day, but subconsciously they do. So they say, okay, mom's calling. So these are alternative hypotheses for what's going on here. Although some people say, hey, it's actually telepathy. People are sensing the caller is about to call them, and so they know who's calling. So Rupert Sheldrake has really spearheaded the effort in these telephone telepathy protocols and has found a number of positive results in various studies. in 2003 published a paper that had 571 trials where there were 4 participants, so people were guessing one of 4 people. There was a 25% chance level of them guessing accurately, and they found a 40% accuracy rate, and this was highly significant. They also found that familiar callers were more accurate, and that if the callers had emotional closeness, they were more accurate, and they didn't see that physical distance made a difference in the results. In 2015, he did another study with over 2,000 trials with 3 participants, so there was a 33% chance of guessing accurately, and they found a 42% accuracy rate. And there have been numerous studies done since then using videotaping, using emails, using text messages, and automated protocols on smartphones with positive findings. Other researchers have found mixed results. So Lobach and Bierman in 2004 found a positive results, but Schmidt et al. In 2004 paper, they just found chance level accuracy. Similarly, in the 2009 paper, they found a 30% hit rate when 25% was expected, although the results were not significant due to low statistical power. So like the typical scientist, I will say more research is needed. So another thing that comes up about this telephone telepathy is it actually telepathy or is it precognition? And so what do we mean by that? So does the person know that they're calling because they're sensing their own future when they've answered the call and they know who's the person who's calling? Or is it because the person calling is thinking about them and so they somehow are able to sense this mental intention towards them? And perhaps it's different aspects of the same phenomenon. So Rupert has looked into this a little bit and found in the over 2,000 trials in a different study, this was with mobile phones, and there were 2 types of trials, where one in which it was a precognitive model and another in which it was a telepathic model, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. And the precognitive trials had chance level results, whereas the telepathic trials had highly significant results. So another aspect of this that I find personally very interesting is around relatedness, genetic relatedness to people. I'm very curious about how genes, how our biology influences our psi abilities. And so we, of course, hear plenty of anecdotes that these abilities run in families. There have been very few studies done. Some of them have just asked people if it has run in families, and we have seen positive findings at IONS in our own work there. There's been one pedigree analysis done by Cohn in the UK and found an autosomal dominant transmission, which is really quite fascinating, but that hasn't been followed up. And of course, we did a small pilot study, a case control study, looking at high-functioning psychics that were vetted and controls, and found difference in the non-coding region of chromosome 7. So there's some background for interest in discovering if the genetic component is related to this ability to guess who is calling on the phone. So all of this background kind of led us to design a telephone telepathy experiment that included looking at genetics and other potential predictors of accuracy. So the primary objective of this study was to evaluate accuracy of people being able to guess who they would be connected to to assess if genetic relatedness influenced their accuracy, and to also look at the relationship of physical distance, emotional closeness, or communication frequency to accuracy. So we had groups of 3 people, and each one of those groups were meant to complete 12 trials or 12 calls. These groups of 3 were adults. They were 18 years or older. They had to have a smartphone and English competency, and they couldn't have any acute medical illness or mental illness that would preclude them from participating. When we had them register, they registered through SurveyMonkey. There was a registering participant, and that participant would complete the survey to enroll their group. They were asked to choose the percentage of relatedness for each person in their group, and so they would do that in a pairwise way. They also entered the physical distance in miles from each paired person, how emotionally close they were, and how often they normally communicated. Now, here's the unique aspect of the study design that we included to be able to tease apart this telepathic versus precognitive hypothesis for how this worked. So people were randomized to this path A or path B after they registered. So path A was the precognitive path. The server would call the participants, all 3 participants, at the same time. And then they would ask them, who do you think you would be connected to? And then after the participants chose, then the server would randomly select who they would be connected to, and then they would actually be connected, and they'd be on the call for about 30 seconds. So this is the precognitive model, because the computer is selecting who they'll be connected to after they actually make their choice. The telepathic model was a little different. The server would actually call, it actually called both participants at the same time. This isn't quite accurate here. It would call both participants at the same time, and person A would be directed to send their positive intentions to person B. And then person B at the same time would be asked, who do you think you're going to be connected to? So person A is sending their positive mental intention, person B would guess, and then they would be connected. So the research questions were, how accurate are the precognition trials? And of course, we hypothesized that it would be greater than chance. Same for the telepathic trials. But we also hypothesized that the telepathic trials would be more accurate than the precognitive trials. We hypothesized that people who were more related would be more accurate, and that emotional closeness would be a predictor of accuracy, as would communication frequency, but that physical distance would not. So here are the results. I will first talk about recruitment. Recruitment was incredibly challenging, and I'll speak to this a little bit more when we get to the limitations. Our original goal was to have 100 groups, so that's 300 people, and only family members. We did massive recruitment campaigns, including coast-to-coast interview with George Norrie. If you know him, he has millions of followers, webinars, social media, Facebook ad, podcast interviews. And still, with all of that, recruitment was incredibly challenging. And we made a number of changes to this pre-registered study. Thank you to Carolyn and Jim for supporting us with all that. And of course, with each change, we submitted a revision of that to the Kessler Parapsychology Unit. So we did finally finish the study. We did not reach our 300 people. We ended up with 177 participants, completers and non-completers. You see the demographics here. Average age was about 45, college educated, mostly female, but not as high as we see in our other studies. Usually it's like 75 to 80% female, so it was a little more balanced. And you see the ethnicity breakdown here. There was a little bit more diversity, which is great, than our usual studies where it's mostly of people of European descent. So when we looked at the precognition trials, for accuracy, we predicted it would be higher than 33%. It was not. This was a non-significant finding for the precognition trials. The telepathic trials were significant. We actually had 48.1% correct for the telepathic trials where the two people were connected. And that was a significant difference between the two different trial types. When we looked at if genetic relatedness was predicted accuracy, without any of the other variables in the model, we found that people who were 25% related, which is like a niece or nephew, an uncle or aunt, they had about a 3.5% times increase of guessing correctly. And if people were 50% related, it was about 1.9 times greater chance of guessing correctly. Oh geez, I have 5 minutes. Okay. But the 12.5% was not significant. But what was interesting is when we included the other potential predictors in the model, only the 25% still had a significant finding there. In terms of the other potential predictors, we did not see that emotional closeness played a role. We did see that communication frequency did, but physical distance did not. So in terms of our hypotheses, the communication frequency matched that, as did the physical distance. So in summary, can people accurately guess who is calling them without using traditional means? I put here sort of, because we see that in the telepathic trials, but not the precognitive trials. And in terms of the genetics, I would say it's inconclusive. Physical distance was no, emotional closeness was no, and communication frequency was yes. So there's a number of limitations that are really important to consider when looking at these results. The first is that, the way we designed this was to avoid cheating, and that cheating really wasn't possible for the precognitive path because all three of the people were connected at the same time. Even if they were in the same room, they couldn't know who they were going to be connected with because they were chosen after they actually made their choices. But cheating could happen for the telepathic trials if the participants were in the same room because they could cue each other. Oh, I just got the call. Oh, I'm supposed to be directing my attention to you. We did do a post hoc analysis of looking at accuracy for participants who lived in the same house. So they put 0 for their physical distance and compared that accuracy to people who had more miles between them. And we didn't see a difference between that, but of course that's post hoc. And so ideally future studies would be able to include some way to account for this, like videotaping, although videotaping is difficult when we're trying to do this in situ in this real world environment. Maybe you can help me brainstorm how to do that. Okay, I just mentioned that. And the other aspect of this study that was very challenging that I already mentioned was the recruitment. And so because recruitment was so difficult, we made a number of changes to the protocol. And even though the protocol was changed, and I'll describe how it was changed in a number of ways, the participant task remained the same throughout. So those 2 paths, the randomization, etc., remain the same throughout, but we did make changes to improve recruitment. One is that we initially set out to just include family members in the triad. And, people who were not enrolling or dropping out would say, my family members will not participate in this. Like, they don't believe in it. Can I please enroll friends? And, we kept trying to get family members and it just wasn't working. So we finally included friends that fit into this 0% genetic relationship group. The other thing we found is that, the server, we put a cap in the program for how many times the server would call the participants. And people don't answer their phone. Even if you tell them to put the number in their, contacts, they just would not answer their phone. So the call attempts, we increased it up to 120 times that these people would get called, and it would just go to voicemail. Now, this was with groups who were still committed to complete the study, and the task remained the same, but the times that the server called the people changed. We also, this whole probability of reaching 2 people was higher than reaching 3 people. And so we found that the randomization program that meant to equally allocate 6 trials to telepathy and 6 trials to precognition wasn't working quite right, because we were ending up with more telepathy trials than precognition trials. And so this was something we hadn't anticipated, and once we realized that there was this issue with the randomization schema, we changed that program to ensure that we got 6 of each. And then finally, our original $20 per person was not cutting it. So we increased the compensation to $240. So I know I'm out of time, but this paper is actually under review right now, and the reviewer is saying, all these changes are totally messed up, and even though the task remained the same, it really, you can't look at all the trials because of all these differences, and you just have to look at the trials where all of these conditions were the same. So we're going back and forth with them right now and trying to figure out a solution that makes them happy. So, if I had known that we were going to face all these issues, I don't know if I would have embarked on this study. And if you ever would like to do a study like this, please come talk to me, because I learned so many lessons, and I would love you to have a much easier time than I did. And I just want to offer deep gratitude to the Be All Foundation that funded this project, and the so many incredible people that helped make it happen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions. Oh, yeah. Do you want to go for it, Peter? Yeah.
I'm very eager. That was very, very great talk. Thank you. And thank you for finishing the experiment, because experiments are hard, and it's really great to get it done. So, yeah. 2 questions. One is, how do you know that they couldn't cheat in the telepathy protocol just by texting each other? I suppose, I have a different app on my telephone, and I quick text somebody through WhatsApp when I get the telephone call.
So that was one of the major limitations, is that in the telepathic trial, when there's only 2 people, they could do that.
So they didn't, even if they were on other sides of the planet, they could just quick text? And
they could, if they had another phone.
Okay,
or
so
something
that's
like that.
that's a
So that's a major issue.
Yeah, right. So, next time.
Yeah.
When you do it next
Exactly.
time. Right. Then the second question was, so it's, let's assume that they weren't doing that, and it's a really interesting result. It's not precognition, it's telepathy, like Rupert was seeing.
Yeah.
But there could be, you know, a way in which maybe it was precognition in telepathy anyway, right? It could always be precognition. And maybe you could explain the result is that, oh, the way that you do the protocol under telepathy where I'm thinking about the person or it's different. And it just happens to be more apt for the precognition to work. And that's why you didn't see it, an effect in the other
Yeah, that's a great
files.
point, Peter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Because they're still getting the feedback. Yeah.
When it comes to telepathy, I can mention very shortly the research I did for my PhD on twin telepathy with both genetic and social bond, and compared with their degree of attachment. Rather small sample, but in significant results for identical twins.
That's great.
Yes, so it was.
We tried to recruit twins, and we put it on the twin networks and everything, and we were not able to get twins. It would be fascinating to do this with twins.
Yeah, I managed to cooperate with the British Twin Register, so I reached out to the twins.
That's great.
So I even had an attachment survey asking the twins about with whom they had experiences, both with a twin but also with friends. So there was also a social bond.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I love the study, and I was curious if you had noticed any differences from, say, like studies 1984 versus 2014. Did you notice if there was more abilities for telepathy and precognition before technological advancements, before all these distractions?
Telephone telepathy specifically?
Both, but yes, telephone.
Well, the studies that Rupert did in the early 2000s, found positive results. So I can't really speak to the 80s, so I don't know. I'll answer that.
Okay, we've just got time for one more question. If anybody has one. Adrian?
It's more of a comment. In fact, in addition to what Joran said over here, the twin study we did, even there, I think it was only about 10% of twins, we reckon, had strong psychic experiences. And perhaps your difficulty... sorry. Yeah, okay. There were relatively few twins who had really strong psychic experiences and who succeeded in the experiment. So it's not a royal road to success with twins either. But perhaps your own findings in practice that you found it so difficult to get the relatives to take part as well, indicated maybe it's not an important factor, because otherwise they wouldn't have turned to their friends as volunteers rather than the relatives. Yeah.
Right. The sense we got from the volunteers who were willing to share is it was, the registering participant was very interested in psi, very interested in telepathy, and open to doing the study. But they didn't have any relatives who were open to it, and that the taboos around it was kind of preventing them from engaging their family members to participate also. Great. Thank you so
brilliant.
much.
Thank you.